At first, Caleb thought she was picking something up from the ground. A fallen earring maybe, a napkin. But then he realised she wasn't moving. She was kneeling, right there on the warm stone driveway, in front of the front steps, just a few feet away from his car. Her apron was wrinkled, her eyes were red, and her voice, barely above a whisper, broke the morning stillness. "Please, sir, don't go out today." He froze. Caleb Whitmore was not a man easily shaken. Former Marine, now a real estate tycoon. The kind of man who wore calm like a suit. But something in the way she knelt there, shaking, barefoot, her hands joined together like she was praying, stopped him cold. "What is this, Imani?" he asked, his tone caught between concern and disbelief. "Are you hurt?" She looked up slowly, and for the first time in the months she had worked at the estate, he saw fear in her eyes. Not fear of punishment, not fear of him, but something deeper. "I know this sounds crazy," she said, her voice breaking, "but I need you to listen, please." The air was warm, the street was quiet, the sun was rising over the palm trees behind the mansion. But inside Caleb's chest, something stirred. Just an hour earlier, Imani had woken up from a nightmare. Not the kind you shake off and forget. The kind that stays with you, presses on your chest, makes you question everything. She'd had this feeling once before, 7 years ago. That morning, her older brother had left for work. She'd begged him to take a different road. He laughed it off, said she worried too much. By sundown, he was gone. Since then, Imani never spoke of feelings, never told anyone when her chest grew tight or her hands trembled. She stayed quiet, stayed safe, stayed invisible. But not this time. Because this morning nothing felt right. Caleb's usual driver had called in sick, without warning. The backup car had already been detailed and parked differently. Alyssa had been whispering on the phone in the garden again, just like 2 nights ago. And Caleb's briefcase, usually packed minutes before leaving, was already zipped and ready before sunrise. Too many signs, too much quiet. So when she saw him walk down the steps in his crisp white shirt, one hand on his wristwatch, the other reaching for his keys, she didn't think. She dropped to her knees on the driveway, under the soft shadows of the columns. "I'm begging you," she said again, her voice cracking. "Don't go." Caleb stared at her. He didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood there, heart suddenly pounding, for reasons he couldn't explain. Caleb hadn't said a word in over 20 seconds. That might not sound like a long time. But when someone is kneeling in front of you, begging you not to leave your own home, it stretches, feels like the world holds its breath. He looked down at Imani. Her uniform was dusty at the knees. Her braids were falling slightly out of place. She wasn't performing, she wasn't asking for attention. She was pleading. "Imani," he finally said, voice low, "you need to get up. This isn't okay." "I know," she whispered. "I know how it looks, but if I stay quiet and you walk out that gate..." Her throat tightened. "I don't think you'll come back." Before he could answer, the front door opened behind him. Alyssa's heels clicked against the marble like tiny daggers. She appeared in a silky white robe, coffee cup in one hand, phone in the other. Her makeup was already flawless, like she'd been camera-ready since dawn. "What on earth is going on out here?" she asked, stepping down the last stair. Her eyes landed on Imani, still on the ground, her lips curled. "Oh, for God's sake." "She stopped me," Caleb said quietly, still facing Imani. Alyssa raised an eyebrow. "From what, going to your meeting?" "She asked me not to leave the house." A beat of silence, then a sharp laugh. "You're kidding, right?" Imani didn't move. She kept her head down, hands still folded. "I had a dream," she said. "It wasn't like the usual ones. It was clear. You left the house, got in the car, but you didn't come back. There was blood, people yelling your name. It felt real." Alyssa scoffed. "This is absurd." Caleb turned toward her. "Just hold on." "Hold on," she snapped. "You're letting the maid dictate your schedule now?" Caleb didn't answer. He was still watching Imani. There was no drama in her voice, no stutter, no show. Just a kind of quiet terror he couldn't shake. He looked down at his car keys, then back at her, and something, he still doesn't know what, told him not to go. He exhaled, long, slow. Then he turned and walked back toward the house. Imani's breath caught. Behind him, Alyssa stared. "Wait, what are you doing?" "I'm not going," Caleb said. Alyssa stepped in front of him. "You have an investor meeting in 45 minutes. You've been working on this deal for months." "I know." "Then what the hell are you doing?" He didn't answer. He walked inside, dropped his keys on the side table, and sat on the edge of the living room couch, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. For a second, no one moved. Then Alyssa hissed under her breath and stormed back inside, her perfume trailing behind her like smoke. Imani was still outside. Her knees ached, her palms were dusty. But she stayed right where she was, for just a moment longer, watching the man who had just chosen a whisper over millions. And deep down she knew. This was only the beginning. The living room had never felt this quiet. Caleb sat forward on the edge of the couch, elbows resting on his knees, eyes locked on the tile floor like it held answers. The air conditioning hummed softly overhead. Somewhere down the hall, Alyssa was pacing. He could hear her voice, muffled, probably yelling into her phone. He didn't care. His heart was still pounding, and he couldn't explain why. She said, "I wouldn't come back." He replayed Imani's words over and over. It sounded ridiculous, even to him. He was a man of structure, logic, reason. He built entire companies on numbers and contracts, not gut feelings. And yet, something about her eyes, that fear, that sincerity. He rubbed his face with both hands. That's when his phone rang. He looked over, the screen lit up. Fiona, office secretary. He picked up. "Caleb speaking." There was a pause. Then Fiona's voice came through, but not her usual calm. She sounded shaken. "Sir, I'm so sorry to call like this, but Sean, your driver, there's been an accident." Caleb sat up straight. "What?" 3rd Street Bridge. "A truck lost control. Hit your Lexus. He's unconscious. They took him to Mercy General. We thought you were inside the car." Caleb's mouth went dry. His Lexus, the one parked for this morning's meeting. Same route, same time. He didn't speak, couldn't. He stared at the glass coffee table in front of him, at the keys he was holding just 20 minutes ago. If he'd left the house on time, like always, he would have been in that car. Fiona's voice came again, softer this time. "Sir, are you okay?" "I'm fine," he said quietly. "Thank you for calling." He ended the call. His hand fell to his side, his fingers trembled. It wasn't just a feeling anymore. Something was waiting for him outside that gate. He closed his eyes for a moment, and for the first time in a very long time he said a silent thank you to a girl no one listened to. A girl in a maid's uniform, kneeling in the driveway. From the hallway, footsteps approached. Alyssa appeared again, robe tied tight, phone still in her hand. "You're still here?" she asked. "Just sitting?" "There was an accident," Caleb said without looking at her. She blinked. "What?" "My driver, the Lexus, hit by a truck." She paused mid-scroll. "And you think that means what?" Caleb turned to face her, his expression calm but cold. "I think if I had gotten in that car like I planned, I wouldn't be standing here." She scoffed. "Accidents happen every day, Caleb. Don't make this into some spiritual story." He stared at her, really stared. No worry in her eyes, no relief, not even curiosity. Just irritation. And in that moment, something shifted inside him. He didn't say anything else. Just sat back, watched her disappear into the hallway. And in the silence that followed, one truth became clearer than ever. Something in his life was very, very wrong. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He lay awake in a house that suddenly felt foreign. The walls were still the same shade of soft grey. The chandelier above the staircase still sparkled just right. The scent of Alyssa's jasmine candles drifted faintly down the hall. But something was different now. Everything felt staged, like he was walking through a showroom, not a home. He glanced toward the guest room door. Alyssa had locked herself in hours ago. She said she needed space, said she didn't want to argue. But truthfully, there was nothing left to argue about, because Caleb wasn't angry. He was alert, the kind of alertness that comes not from caffeine, but from instinct. From that quiet tug in your chest that says, something's off, something doesn't add up. All day he replayed her reaction. No shock, no fear, no "thank God you weren't in that car." Just annoyance, almost like the accident had ruined her plans. That was when he started watching, not saying much, just watching. And he saw things, small things that never stood out before. How Alyssa barely looked at him anymore unless she was complaining. How her calls got longer, quieter. How she avoided even walking past Imani like guilt clung to her shadow. He said nothing, not yet, but something inside him had shifted. A wall had come down, and through that crack, doubt was pouring in like water. It wasn't long before Imani approached him again. It happened 2 days later, just after lunch. Caleb was at the dining table flipping through emails on his tablet. Alyssa had stepped out to answer a call, some vague story about an old friend visiting from New York. Imani came in to clear the plates. She didn't speak at first. Then as she bent to pick up a napkin, her voice dropped, barely a whisper. "Sir?" He looked up. She didn't meet his eyes. "Please don't sign anything this week." He frowned. "What?" She stood still, hands pressed to the tray. "I know how this sounds, but I had another dream." It was clear. There were papers. You signed them. Not long after, everything collapsed. You lost the company. Your accounts were frozen. There were police. Sir, they put you in handcuffs. Caleb felt his chest tighten. She kept going, voice steady. If you sign any document this week, you won't just lose money. You might end up in jail for something you didn't even do. Before he could ask more, footsteps echoed in the hall. Alyssa reappeared, laughing into her phone, acting like nothing mattered. Imani quietly picked up the tray and walked out. But her words stayed. They didn't just stay, they sank deep. Caleb didn't know what to believe anymore. But what he did know, clearer than ever, was that this girl, this maid, this barely seen shadow in his own home, she saw everything. Derek showed up on a Thursday. Loud as always. The engine of his silver Tesla hadn't even shut off before he was already halfway to the door, sunglasses on, voice booming like the front yard was a stage. "My guy!" he shouted, pulling Caleb into a tight hug. "Man, I swear, thank God you didn't get in that car. That wreck looked brutal." Caleb managed a small smile. Yeah, it was close. Close? That was a freaking miracle. Derek leaned back, gave him a once-over. "You good, though? You look, I don't know, quiet. I've had a lot on my mind." "Well, good news," Derek said, patting his briefcase. "I brought something to take your mind off all that." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess, the Dubai deal." "Bingo!" Derek grinned. "It's back on the table. They still want in. All we need is your signature, and we're off to the races." Caleb didn't reply right away. He watched his friend carefully. Watched how fast he spoke, how tightly he gripped the handle of that briefcase, how he avoided sitting too close. "Leave it with me," Caleb said. Derek blinked. "You're not going to go through it now?" "I'll take my time with it. I'm not rushing anything this week." A pause. Derek's smile faltered for just a second, then came back stronger, but a little more forced. "Sure, yeah, no problem." He handed over the folder, gave Caleb a quick half hug, and started walking back toward the door. "Oh, and hey," he called over his shoulder, "don't overthink it, all right? It's just paper." Caleb didn't answer. Not because he didn't want to, but because every word Imani said 2 days ago was now echoing louder than ever in his head. Don't sign anything this week. If you do, you may end up in jail for something you didn't even do. That night, Caleb waited until the house was silent. Then he opened the folder, and within 2 minutes his stomach dropped. The numbers were off. The land value was lower than what they had agreed on. The payout page had a foreign account Caleb didn't recognise, one that didn't match the company's usual vendors. Something was wrong, something was hidden. He closed the file slowly, locked it in his drawer and picked up his phone. Not to call Derek, not to confront him, but to contact an old friend in finance, someone who owed him a favour. He didn't sleep that night, and by morning the favour came through. It was worse than he thought. Derek had been diverting company funds for nearly 2 years, hiding them under fake project names, routing money to private offshore accounts, all while smiling over drinks, toasting to brotherhood. It wasn't just betrayal, it was criminal. And Caleb, he had been seconds away from signing his name onto all of it, because he trusted the wrong person, and almost ignored the only one who told him the truth. By Saturday morning, the silence in the house was no longer peaceful. It was tense. Alyssa moved through the kitchen like a storm cloud, slamming cabinet doors a little harder than necessary, letting drawers rattle when they shut. Caleb stayed out of her way. He was in no mood to play the husband she pretended to love. He sat in the study, sipping coffee, rereading the financial report from the night before. His chest still felt tight. He hadn't told Alyssa about Derek's offshore accounts. Not yet. He wanted to watch a little longer, and the more he watched, the more he noticed. How Alyssa seemed to flinch every time Imani walked into a room. How she changed the subject whenever anything came close to Caleb's accident. How she called Imani that girl now, as if even saying her name was too much. Then mid-morning, the first crack broke through. "I want her gone," Alyssa said. Caleb looked up from his tablet. "Excuse me?" Imani had just stepped out to water the plants. The front door hadn't even closed yet. "She's too comfortable," Alyssa continued, arms crossed, pacing by the staircase. "She walks around like she owns the place. She walks around quietly, she works. She's quiet because she's listening," Alyssa snapped. "I don't trust her." Caleb set his coffee down slowly. "Imani is the reason I'm still breathing." "She's the reason you're paranoid." "No, Alyssa," he said calmly. "She's the reason I'm paying attention." His tone caught her off guard. She blinked, faltered, but only for a moment. "So what now?" she asked. "You're choosing a maid over your own wife?" "I'm choosing peace," he said. That shut her up. She stared at him for a long second, like she didn't recognize the man standing in front of her anymore. Then, with a tight shake of her head, she grabbed her phone and stormed upstairs. But Caleb didn't follow. He didn't need to, because he already knew something was unraveling, and he could feel it happening faster than either of them could stop. That night, while Alyssa locked herself in the guest room, Imani stayed late in the laundry area, folding, wiping, moving like she always did, quiet, efficient, barely there. But Caleb saw her, and she saw him watching. They didn't speak, but something passed between them, a kind of understanding, a silent agreement. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about the truth, and the truth was getting harder to hide. Alyssa waited until after midnight to make the call. She locked the guest room door, turned off the hallway lights, and pulled the curtains shut. Then, with shaky fingers, she sat on the edge of the bed and dialed Derek's number. He answered on the third ring, voice low and tired. "What now?" "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. There was silence on the line. She swallowed hard. He's still protecting her. He refused to fire her, said she brings him peace. Derek exhaled. Of course he did. She keeps interfering with everything, Alyssa snapped. Every step, every plan. We try, and somehow she ruins it without even knowing. She's just a maid, he muttered. She's not psychic. No, Alyssa said sharply. She's not just a maid, she's a curse. Her voice cracked. She's watching us, Derek. I can feel it. She doesn't say much, but it's like she knows everything. Derek was quiet again. Alyssa stood up and paced, one hand pressed to her forehead. "You told me this would work," she said. "You said if I married him, we'd get inside, access the money, the accounts, the company." "And we have," Derek replied. "The papers were ready. He was supposed to sign." "But he didn't," she hissed, "and now he knows something's off. He looks at me like I'm a stranger, like he's finally waking up." She paused by the window. "You remember that night," she said, "when you sent those guys to wait near the bridge?" "Yeah." "You said it'd be fast, just a scare, maybe a broken leg, something to delay the deal so we could clean up the accounts." "I remember." "Well, she called him," Alyssa said, her voice shaking. "Told him to stay home, told him not to leave. It's like she always knows. Every trap we set, she walks him right around it." Derek sighed. "She's lucky, that's all." "No," Alyssa said. "She's not lucky. She's in the way." She sat back down, pressing her fingers to her temples. "I hate it here," she whispered. "I hate pretending to love this man. I hate sharing a bed with him. I hate the sound of his keys in the door." There was a pause. "You still love me?" Derek asked quietly. "Yes," she said. "That's why I did all this, but it's falling apart." More silence. Then she said something she'd been holding in for weeks. "If something doesn't change soon, I'm walking away, with or without the money." Derek didn't respond. She hung up first, and in the dark of the guest room, Alyssa lay back on the pillows she hadn't bought, in a house she never truly wanted, beside a man she never planned to keep. And for the first time since she said "I do," she felt afraid, because the one person she thought was beneath her was the only one she couldn't control. Saturday came quiet. Too quiet. Caleb was on the back patio, sipping coffee and scrolling through audit reports on his tablet. The Florida sun had just started to warm the edges of the pool. Birds chirped, sprinklers clicked on across the neighbour's lawn. Then Alyssa walked into the living room in a fitted travel dress, her scarf loosely tied over her braids, designer handbag in hand. She didn't look rushed, she looked rehearsed. "I'll be heading out tomorrow morning," she said casually, checking her phone. Caleb didn't look up. "Where to?" "Aventura. My dad's not feeling great, I need to check on him." He nodded slowly. "Okay." She paused, maybe expecting more, questions, a hug, some kind of goodbye. But Caleb just went back to reading. That silence made her shift in place. Still, she smiled. "I'll be back Monday." He nodded again. "Safe travels." She waited one more beat, then turned and walked off, heels clicking softly against the floor. Behind her, Caleb's expression never changed. But the moment she left the room, he picked up his phone and sent one text. "Follow her. Quietly, no contact, just send me updates." The next morning, she left the house at exactly 7:15, sunglasses on, lipstick perfect. She kissed Caleb on the cheek, told him to rest, and got into the car. By 9 o'clock, the first update came in. She didn't go to Aventura. She drove straight to a boutique hotel in Brickell, room 406, checked in as Mrs. Talia Monroe. Caleb stared at the screen for a long moment. By 9:45, the second update came. Derek arrived. Baseball cap, sunglasses, went straight upstairs, same room, no check-in. Caleb sat back. No rage, no shouting. The truth had already been growing inside him for weeks. Now it was just confirmed. They didn't leave the room all day. At 6:20 that evening, Caleb arrived at the hotel in a dark SUV. He didn't tell his driver why. He didn't need to. The receptionist greeted him with a smile. He didn't return it. "Room 406, he said, calm but flat. She hesitated. "Are you?" He slid 2 crisp bills across the counter. "I won't be long." She swallowed hard and handed him the spare key. Caleb didn't rush. He didn't knock. He opened the door quietly. And there they were. Alyssa, wrapped in a white hotel robe, leaning on the minibar with a glass of wine in her hand. Derek, shirtless on the couch, scrolling through his phone. They both looked up, and everything froze. The wine glass in Alyssa's hand slipped a little. Derek stood too fast. But Caleb didn't yell. He didn't move. He just closed the door behind him and looked at them, one by one. Alyssa opened her mouth, nothing came out. Derek tried to smile. "Bro," Caleb raised one hand. "Don't." Derek froze. Caleb turned to Alyssa. "You married me for this?" Her eyes welled up, but she didn't deny it. "You never saw me," she whispered. "You were always married to your company." "And you," Caleb said coldly, "were always married to my bank account." Silence. One long stretched silence. Then Caleb took one last look at both of them. "I hope it was worth it." And with that, he opened the door and walked out. No drama, no screaming, just the quiet exit of a man who had finally seen enough. That night, Caleb didn't sleep. He didn't cry either. He sat alone in the study, lights dimmed low, the house so quiet he could hear the ticking of the wall clock. The papers were already on the table. Divorce documents, company buyout notices, account freezes. He had made 2 phone calls before dinner, one to his lawyer, the other to the firm's accountant. No yelling, no threats, just clean breaks. By morning, Alyssa had sent her lawyer to collect her things. She didn't come herself. She didn't need to. Her message was short. "Tell him I agree to everything. I just want my peace." Peace. The same word Caleb had been chasing for years but never found. Not in his home, not in his marriage, not even in the company he built with the wrong person. He signed everything with a steady hand, but his chest burned. After everyone left, he walked back into the house. The chandeliers sparkled. The curtains swayed in the air conditioning. The scent of luxury candles still lingered, but it all felt hollow. He stood in the middle of the living room and looked around, at the life he'd built, the version of happiness he thought was real. It wasn't grief he felt, it was clarity, and that hurt more than anything else. He didn't know how long he'd been standing there when he heard the soft footsteps behind him. He turned. It was Imani. She wasn't in uniform today. She wore a simple dress, flat shoes, her braids tied back neatly. She didn't speak right away, just walked slowly to the center of the room, hands folded in front of her. "I'm leaving tomorrow," she said quietly. Caleb blinked. "Why?" "My work here is done," she said, her voice calm but final. He swallowed. "You don't have to go." She looked at him gently. "You're the only person who hasn't hurt me," he said. "The only one who saw the danger and still stayed. You didn't lie. You didn't play games. You risked your job to protect me." "I know," she said, "but I wasn't sent to stay." Caleb stepped closer. "Then what were you sent for?" She met his eyes. "To remind you that your instincts were never broken," she said. "You just stopped listening to them." He didn't speak. Imani took a slow breath. "If you had signed those papers," she continued, "you would have lost everything. Your name, your freedom. You would have ended up behind bars while the people who plotted your downfall toasted champagne." He clenched his jaw. "But you didn't," she added. "You stayed, you listened. That means you're ready." He looked at her. "Ready for what?" "To start again," she said, "this time with your eyes wide open." They stood there for a long moment. Then finally she smiled. Not the kind of smile that says goodbye, the kind that says you'll be okay. "Live right," she said, backing toward the door. "Trust slowly, love carefully, watch everyone." And then she was gone. Just like that. Caleb stood in the doorway long after she left. The wind moved through the trees outside. The shadows shifted on the marble floor. And deep in his chest, something broke. But something else began to heal. He turned, walked back into the living room, picked up the framed photo of his wedding day, stared at it for 5 long seconds, then shattered it against the floor. The glass cracked like a lie. He bent down, picked up a shard and saw his reflection in it, cut, bruised, but finally awake. And for the first time in years, he smiled. Not because everything was fine, but because the storm was finally over, and he had survived it. It took time. A full year, to be exact. 12 quiet months of rebuilding, of paperwork, strategy meetings, new hires, of cleaning up the mess Derek left behind. One document, $1, one broken trust at a time. Caleb didn't rush. He didn't chase anything. He just worked and healed. He poured himself back into Crestrock, his company, his name. He restructured everything from the inside out. Fired the board members who once bowed to Derek. Opened a new office in Austin. Hired young minds who asked questions and said no when it mattered. He refused bribes. He walked away from shady deals. He became the kind of man he wished he'd been all along. And slowly the house changed too. The perfume faded. The fake candles got thrown out. The laughter that echoed through the halls was no longer rehearsed, it was real. Sometimes it came from dinner with old friends. Sometimes from just sitting on the porch with a book and some jazz in the background. He started sleeping better. Started eating again. Started smiling without forcing it. And when love came knocking again, it didn't come loud. It came quietly. Through someone he met at a charity auction. A woman who didn't care about balance sheets or last names. She cared about books, children, soft things. They didn't rush, didn't post photos. But one evening, under a string of porch lights and the smell of lemon pie, he held her hand. And he knew, this time it was real. Somewhere across town, a small black car pulled up in front of a quiet duplex with chipped paint and tension in the air. Imani stepped out wearing a modest dress and flat shoes. Her hair was neatly braided, her face calm. She rang the doorbell. A tired-looking woman answered, eyes swollen from crying. The woman blinked in confusion. "Are you the lawyer?" Imani smiled gently. "No, ma'am," she said. "I'm the housemaid." Inside that home, a husband was on the edge of walking out. A wife felt unseen. A marriage was barely holding on. But change had just arrived. Not with shouting, not with sermons, but with someone who saw what others ignored. And wherever she went, the lies fell silent. And the truth found its way back in. Honestly, this is a beautiful story. Not because of big twists or dramatic highs, but because everything feels so human. A man who thought he had it all together, slowly realizing he'd been blind. And a woman who never raised her voice, but quietly became the only one who truly cared. What I love is that Caleb doesn't wake up because of some miracle. He wakes up because he finally listens to himself. And Imani, she doesn't stay to be praised. She comes, does what's right and leaves. That's real strength. The story doesn't try too hard, but it lingers, soft but lasting. You chose a very gentle, powerful way to tell it. Thank you, truly, for staying with me until the very end of this story. It means more than you know. If this touched something in you, please consider leaving a like or subscribing to the channel. It helps this small space grow and helps these quiet stories find the people who need them. I'll see you again right here on Rain Inside. Take care.